Hello, everybody. I'm here with another live. It's Friday. A lot of people have asked specifically about altars. And altars, most of us who grew up in a religious tradition, we're very familiar with altars. Altars are a sacred space dedicated to spiritual practice. It's consecrated, it's set apart in some way. And in our busy world, we honor that chunk of space in a way we aren't always able to honor the world around us. So point one, there's no expert on altars. Altars mean different things to different people. I'm not an expert. I come to you as somebody who's practiced rather, a while, share ideas and practices that I follow in order to inspire you. I'm a bit of a maverick. So I hope in some ways it inspires you to read the books, get the information, but then go deep inside and follow your heart. That's what's really important. So what if I told you right now, this is an altar in and of itself. Many people, an abalone shell for doing their smoke cleansing. And at the very most basic level, this can be considered an altar. I have a little travel set that I take with me if I'm going to be away from home for a while, and I set it up with a candle beside it because it is an altar in miniature. Because you've got water represented with the abalone shell. I have salt in the bottom of the shell, and that salt is earth. And then fire because of the ashes when I burn my herbs, okay? And air because of the smoke that rises from the herbs. So, in a sense, this encompasses all the elements. And if you're an elemental witch, and I like to orient my altars with elements, if you're an elemental witch, this can be a complete altar unto itself. So you can see how broad the definition of altar is. What I have, when you first come into my home, in the front door, altar with a mirror behind it. And that's where I put my money bowl. That's where I like to have candles burning. It's sort of a public space. It's sort of at the heart and the center of my home in a way, just because of the way my house is constructed. And I do have things representing elements on that altar. I have rocks. I have things that have deep meaning to me. A lot of times when I do candle work for somebody, healing work, and I light a candle, that's where that candle goes. Because all day long, I pass that area, I'm drawn to it. And I can repeat the affirmation or repeat the little chant or prayer because I see that candle. That creates a sacred space. It vibrates with an energy because of the crystals that are on it, because of the intentions that I've set there, and it vibrates out throughout my home. In my kitchen, I have a shelf set aside, and I have a place for a candle. That's where I keep my little book that I've showed you in one of the previous videos, the little black book that has chants for every day in it. I can look in there and see what suits me, what chant or affirmation. That goes on that shelf. And then I have a couple of other things up there that are sacred to me. And that's kind of like my little kitchen hearth altar. Upstairs, and I'm changing my rooms around, I had a room set aside just for magic work. And some of you have seen pictures of the huge stump that I use as an altar in the center of that room. Circles are very sacred to me. And I have some river rocks for my very special place along the Kings River that wanted to come home with me. And my daughter painted the symbols of the elements on those river rocks. And I actually pulled a compass up on my phone and I aligned those rocks with the cardinal directions where the elements are usually considered to be in North America. Not everybody places them in the same place. There's there's just so many traditions. And that's the altar where I really do what I think of as my heavy work. Now that room kind of, I don't know, it just, after a while my energy wasn't there like it should be. My energy merged over here. Because in this room, this is where I do my tarot card readings with my clients. This is the room where I make my videos. This is the room where my plants and special crystals reside, because my cats devastated them in the living room. I had to move 2 shelves and over a dozen plants and all my crystals that were very special up here in the window as well. And this is also the room where one of my stalwart house spirits resides. He's not really a house spirit. He's a spirit that has attached himself to this house. He married the daughter of the man who built it. And he has stayed here as a protector because the neighborhood has changed a lot since this house was built. And he's very protective of this space. And he wants good energy to flow out to the neighborhood. And he drew me in and he's been very protective. So he's in here also. So I see this as a room full of energy and life. So I'm moving my working altar into this room. Partly I also hope to be able to film some rituals, do some things along with you in this room once I get it set up properly. All you need for an altar is a clean set aside place. It can be a shelf, it can be a tabletop. What matters the most to you? If it's elemental in nature, if you work with the elements and you're looking for that type of a balance in your practice, there are different crystals that align with each of the elements. Simply having those crystals there. And then I always like to throw in a candle. If you work with any kind of deity or spirit, something representing them, that's a sacred space. You cleanse it, you set it aside, and you work there. But basically, if you want to be Wiccan and you've joined Wicca, because Wicca is actually a religion, a real Wiccan has gone through a ceremony and a training and has been accepted into Wicca. They have specific things on the altar. And that's where you'll see these directions that say you need an atome, you need a chalice on your altar to represent the feminine and the masculine energies. They're very into the balance of the feminine and the masculine energies. And so, the chalice and the atome, which is that double-sided knife, that has real meaning for them. They're more defined in how that space needs to be set up, because in some ways it represents for them almost like a microcosm of this universal energy. And there are other traditions similarly that are stricter in what you put on an altar. Someone says, is there anything we shouldn't put on the altar? Well, the only thing that I think you need to be careful with is not to, if you're doing deities, if you work with goddesses or gods or that type of thing, be careful who you mix, because some of them wouldn't appreciate having the other close by. But other than that, really, it's your meaning. You can draw symbols on paper. I've done that at various times when I'm working on something and had it on my altar. I do have an altar to one spirit in particular that I work with who doesn't get along with anybody else in a way, really needs her own space. And so I do have her on her own altar too, that I make offerings directly to her. But in general, there's nothing you can't put on your altar if it's sacred to you. I have an ancestor altar where I have cremains of my father that I have to move into here. And I have, my great-grandfather's pipe and my great-grandmother's quilt, and, it goes on. And I switch those items up sometimes with other heirlooms that I have. So I don't put that on my working altar, but you might. Seriously, it just depends on what you're using that space for. I think it's nice to have at least 2 altars. I like to have the ancestral altar that you can kind of go to and have things on there that represent your family, people you were close to, and use that just as a place for them and, a place to call them in. And usually on that kind of an altar, you would have some clean water, because that's like a portal for them. That's emotions. It's very fluid. So you would put your bowl of clear water, and then I always have a candle. I have a place where I like to light incense, or I burn tobacco for them. It seems like it's something the other side can enjoy and that they're attracted to. I have a vase. Sometimes up there I put flowers. So I do have that kind of an altar. So think broadly when it comes to an altar. I like to have one altar, which is my stump, that's a working altar. And that altar, I make a mess on that altar. I have a circle made by those 4 stones. The elements are called around that altar. I have cleansed that altar. I have a ring of salt on the floor around that altar. It's a very sacred space for me for working. So a lot of times when I am putting together products, I will do it at the working altar. I will mix them there because the energy is so amazing there and it's so uplifting. That's just I'm very loose on defining altars and even looser on an outside altar. If you want to have something outside, if you work with elementals outside, if you work with nature spirits outside, because they're not formal in the way that we are. Their perspective is not a human perspective. It's very different. I'm going to put some things up that have to do with altars because I think that it's something people are really interested in. Creating that sacred space for yourself, ongoing cleansing, just a place that draws you, kind of the heart of your work, so to speak. We made money bowls yesterday. I haven't lit mine and set it officially up yet. But this is almost like an altar unto itself because of all the energies that are here and the vibrational energy it's giving off. And I love that it's a circle too. I didn't give you concrete information, but at the same time, I hope that what I opened up to you is, unless you're working within a particular strict tradition, you don't need to listen to anybody about what to put on your altar. You don't need to defend your altar. No, the coverings do not need to be a certain color. In fact, sometimes I change my one that you can see from the front door. Sometimes I change that to be more of a seasonal altar. I like to celebrate the seasons there too. But nobody can define that for you. Please don't feel like you have to buy a lot of stuff. You can if you want. The altar cloths that I have in my shop are lovely and very inexpensive. I have little cauldrons. Most of my altars have cauldrons on them. They're pretty inexpensive, the small ones, but at the same time, the nitty-gritty witch who says, you know what, let's just get it done. I also have Pyrex dishes because sometimes in the kitchen when I light my little bundles up, here's one that says a cauldron. Now there's ashes everywhere at blue. One way I get these to really light is when I'm downstairs preparing to do a reading. I make my cup of coffee. I turn the gas burner on my stove and I really light these things up. I get them really burning. And then I realize I haven't brought my abalone shell or my cauldron. And so I grab a little Pyrex dish, put it in there and carry it upstairs. I really am a nitty-gritty witch. I get it done and not so much into the aesthetics. It's not who I am. But you can just see that this table where I'm filming this and everything around me where I do my readings in this space also, it's almost like this table has become an altar for me. It's a very sacred space. I meet people here. I do readings for them. Sometimes I do a little bit of mediumship work for them. This is really a place of power that emanates out throughout the room in my house. Maybe that's an altar. Occasionally there are more complex spells that I do because it's my practice of working with angels and archangels and different kinds of spirits where direction matters. And so that's useful for me to have those elements marked. Also, sometimes I'm doing something where I'm really kind of going between realms in a sense. And then I need to cast a circle. And I always do it at my stump altar. And those rocks being in that direction help me call in the watchers from the different cardinal directions and help me call them in to form that circle. That's another reason I like to have the elements marked and I like to have them in the right location. Because then I think it really does matter because you're almost using them in a way and calling them in to open up a portal, a protected portal to another realm. Many blessings.